Hello everyone. Good evening and a very warm welcome to the Masterclass of Practical Cities. Today, we are having third Masterclass under Transportation and Mobility theme. This is 22nd Masterclass in our series of Masterclasses till now. Before we begin the Masterclass, I would like to reintroduce you to the initiative Practical Cities. This initiative is led by young urban professionals working across various fields in the urban sector to motivate and encourage all the urban enthusiasts who want to learn about practical and on-ground solutions to make our cities more livable and sustainable. Today, Practical Cities platform is honored to have Ms. Aswathy Dilip, the Senior Program Manager at the Institute of Transportation and Development Policy, ITDP, India, for our third masterclass under the theme Transportation and Mobility for celebrating International Women's Day 2021. Yes. Welcome, ma'am, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Chetan. And I think it's a fantastic pleasure to be on Practical Cities platform. And thank you so much for bringing me aboard today.
Yes, I'll introduce you. So to introduce Aswathy ma'am, she is Senior Program Manager at ITDP India program, leading the Complete Streets as well as Inclusive Cities strategy, policy, and projects work. With support from her smart and passionate team, she works with the national, state, and city governments, providing them technical assistance on sustainable, equitable, and inclusive urban mobility and development. Her current most exciting work includes championing a cycling revolution in the country throughout India, through the India Cycles for Change Challenge in partnership with the Smart Cities mission of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. In early 2019, her team prepared comprehensive Complete Streets Toolkit, which was endorsed and released by National Smart Cities Mission. Ma'am is also working with government of Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra to transform thousands of kilometers of congested roads into vibrant streets for people, help the cities implement bold parking reforms, and build support for high-quality sustainable mass transit. Her work on smart cities in Chennai, the Chennai Smart Streets for People program, won the Ashden Award 2020 under the Sustainable Mobility category. As we all know, today we are celebrating International Women's Day. Before moving forward, let's know something about it. Every year, United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, observes 8th March as International Women's Day. UNDP is the UN's global development network advocating for change and connecting countries to knowledge, experience, resource to help people build a better life. As UNDP says, this year's International Women's Day is like no other, as countries and communities start to slowly recover from a devastating pandemic, which we have the chance to finally end the exclusion and marginalization of women and girls. This year's theme is Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in the COVID-19 World. This year's International Women's Day is a rally cry for generation equality. It is time to finally fully harness the power of women's leadership to realize a more equal, more inclusive, and more sustainable future. So, Aswathy ma'am, I would like you to share your experiences and ITDP's work, which is on ground related to transport in India with focus on women in transport. To begin, I would like to ask you, ma'am, as per today's topic, what is your opinion pertaining to women mobility in Indian cities, and why do you think it is an important topic to discuss? Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Chetan. I think you asked a very, very important question as to why is it important for us to discuss about women and women in transportation. And to give you some, sort of experiences from my life recently, I was in a discussion and we were talking about, transforming our cities and things like that. And when we were discussing about the fact that it's very important to look at women and their requirements, which are so different from men, there were some, senior male officers who were saying that this seems to be like the trend now to put in a lot of emphasis on women, but how is their transportation any different from us? And if we did something which is beneficial for everyone, it would obviously also sort of benefit women. But unfortunately, that's not true. And that is what we're going to discuss today. And for this, let me just share my screen and take you through why is it that we need to look at women and how they move and how we need to create transportation very specifically for women differently. So let me just present my screen. So let's look at how is it that we can mobilize women in transport. So I'm going to start with a simple question for all of you. And Chetan had told me that we have a lot of young professionals, both men and women, who will be joining this this session. And this is a question for us. What is the percentage of women in Indian population? I would request all of you to type this down in the chat box. And don't have any judgments. Whatever you think is the percentage of women in Indian population. It's a rather simple question. I'm going to let you write it down. And I'm going to give you 5 counts. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Chetan, since you are the one that I can speak to, can you tell me what is the percentage of women in Indian population?
I would go to 50, but going census, it has been reduced down. So I would go for around 47, 48%.
That's great. That's great, Chetan. So we're almost equally there in all our cities as men. So we're currently at 48%, which is almost the same as men. So we're there in all our urban areas and rural areas equally. Women are there. And now let me ask you another question, which is what is the percentage of women's labor force participation? So what is the percentage of women who are participating in labor? Now here again, I say no judgments. Please go ahead and write this in the chat box. And just to give you some, give you a clue so that you can use that and then put in your numbers. I'm just going to share what the male labor force participation is, which is at about 76%. So 76% is male labor force participation. What do you think is the women's labor force participation? So I'm going to give you the answer as well. In India, 20.5% of women participate in the labor force, which actually means that 4 out of 5 women in India are not working. And the more critical point that I'd like to bring to your notice is that this particular value has been falling since the last 3 decades. In 1990, there was about 30.3% of India's female labor participation, whereas today or in 2019, when World Bank came up with the study, it had declined to 20.5%. This makes India's female labor force participation the lowest in South Asia, which is even lower than Pakistan and Afghanistan. So, of course, there are social, cultural reasons why women may not be participating. But what I'd like to highlight is that mobility plays a very critical role in enabling women to access whether it is education or work or healthcare or recreation or any other services that we in the city provide to its citizens. And here it's important to notice that the way women travel is very different from the way men travel. 9 out of 10 trips by women are by foot or public transportation. Is something that we realized when we did a study in our Indian cities. And hence, having poor either walking infrastructure or public transportation impacts women very, very differently as to the way it would impact men. And I'm sure most of you all know that in many families, whether it is the first 4-wheeler or whether it's the first 2-wheeler, it's almost always something that the male member uses for his transportation within the city. So 9 out of 10% of trips by women are by foot or public transportation. Here again, let's come to another question. Now we know that they're traveling by foot and public transportation, but is there again another level of nuance in the way they travel? How do women's travel differ from men? And here I'd like to ask you a question. I've shared 3 pictures of women traveling in the last 3 slides, including this one. What is one common feature? Here again, go ahead and type it down in the chat box, and let me see if you've been actually paying attention to the first 5 minutes of this particular presentation. It's pretty simple. You can see it right in front. The difference between the way men travel and the way women travel is that women tend to travel with a lot of accompanying travelers. So in all the 3 pictures that I showed you, there were children with women. So women tend to travel with their children, they tend to travel with elderly. male members most often travel is characterized by moving from home to office, and mostly during peak hours alone. Of course, some men may be helping women by occasionally, buying groceries or taking children to school if it's at the same time as when they need to go to work, where they might be dropping off older children. But most often, when the children are young, like infants or toddlers and elderly, most of these women, their trips involve moving with these accompanying travelers, and their trips are characterized by short trips. They're traveling from home to maybe the Anganwadi or the play school for the children. They might take the elderly to the healthcare center, go to the market, buy something, go back and pick up the children, go back home. If they're one amongst those 20% that actually are participating in working, then they may go to office in between all of this as well. And most of the time when they leave homes, after the men have left for their work, it is mostly during off-peak hours. So women are doing short trips with various accompanying travelers, and they are traveling during the off-peak hours. So here I'd like to just bring in some, stories that we've heard from different people that we've been interviewing through our years of work. And here is a middle-aged woman whom we had interviewed, and we had asked her, how does it feel to travel in the city? As you can see, she's sort of finding her way sandwiched between parked vehicles and fast-moving traffic on the other side. And what she had said in Tamil was that, "Na ennoda uyir kaiyila pudichu nadakkrema," which actually means that she's walking with her heart in her hand. And that is the experience that most women feel in our cities. Secondly, we've also heard about stories of women who tell us that she had foregone her a work which paid her a lot more, but then required her to travel much further away because of poor public transportation, and had settled down for opportunities which are closer to her household. These are not stories of just these two different people, but these are stories that that echo in our ears, and we hear from like different parts of the country. A critical other piece is also that women face a lot of sexual harassment. This is mostly when they're walking, when they're waiting at the bus stop, and when they're in the buses. This was a study done by Jagori in 2010, which was done in Delhi, where 90% of the women said that they face sexual harassment. And recently, we've been hearing or seeing a lot of messages, both in the newspaper as well as social media, of how women using different modes have been facing harassment. And I'm sure many of you who are listening to me can definitely echo with this particular thought as well. I'm sure we've had peering eyes looking at us, staring at us as we're waiting in the bus stop, or we've heard people calling out to us, and sometimes even much more intense harassment as well. The last piece that I'd like to say is that employment is also a very critical piece when it comes to public transportation. And we've noticed that there's almost no place for women in public transportation systems. And so all of this is an answer to Chetan, your question as to why is it important for us to look at women in transportation, and why is it important for us to focus on their needs. Now, having established that there is a need for us to look at the way we would ensure that women are empowered and we provide the right environment for them to thrive by creating or giving them the right mobility solution, let's look at how we go ahead and do this. So first is that it's very important for us to have safe, comfortable and convenient walking infrastructure. Now, I'm just going to go next slide and then come back up. So pedestrian connectivity is very, very critical for women to be able to move around in our cities comfortably. So the one that you see towards my left side is a block system, which is much bigger in size, which is mostly focused on the movement of vehicles. In order to allow people, and especially women, to walk comfortably, you need to have a finer grid of streets and roads with much smaller blocks. And I'll just come back to this particular slide to tell you why. Now, as you can see, even if you're living here and if you have a bus stop, which is just about 500 meters away, if you were like sort of a crow flying to that bus stop, just because there was no connection here, the actual connection is this red line, which is about more than a 2 kilometer walk. So by ensuring that we break our blocks, provide direct connections, we would be really helping our women comfortably reach their destinations. Next piece is that once you have the city, and as you start creating cities where the blocks are much smaller in size, the next most important point is to have safe pedestrian infrastructure. So we need wide, continuous footpaths where women, along with their accompanying passengers who might be infants, toddlers, young children, elderly, etc., can walk safely, comfortably, and conveniently. Most often, there could be an element that you miss out, which can entirely, impact women's travel. So for example, let's say you had very wide sidewalks on this particular street, but the lighting was not taken care of, then women would find it extremely uncomfortable to use it. So it's very important to ensure that you always keep the perspective of women in mind while you go ahead and design these spaces. So here I'm going to very quickly take you through an example in Chennai, which is the pedestrian plaza. As you can see, it was characterized by broken sidewalks, a lot of parking, traffic jam, congested streets, which was transformed by Chennai into a wide pedestrian plaza. And the kind of changes that we noticed was that there was a huge increase in young families, women with their children using this space. And because of the good lighting, we noticed that women were staying in this space much longer than previously noticed. And of course, women of all abilities were also embracing this particular space. So these are all some of the benefits that you can see while you do infrastructure and public spaces, while you create these public spaces which are sensitive to the requirements of women. Next, let's move into cycling. Cycling has been facing a huge dip across the country, both with men and women, but particularly with women. So what is it that we can do to make sure that women feel safe and comfortable to cycle? So the most important aspect is that we need safe cycling infrastructure. Now, what does this actually mean? So on arterial streets where the speeds are high, it's very essential for us to ensure that the cycle tracks are segregated. They're continuous with, as a part of a larger network, but they're segregated, well lit and shaded as well for them to be comfortable for women to use it. At the same time, if you're looking at neighborhood streets, because women do make a lot of short trips, here it's not important to have segregated cycle tracks, as you can have shared streets. The cyclists can share the space with the motorists, but it needs to be safe. And by that, I mean that the streets need to be well lit, but it also needs to make sure that traffic is moving in a slow speed. So by ensuring that there's enough traffic calming measures, we can calm these streets to make sure it's comfortable for women. But a very important point is also that women need to have access to cycle. So free cycle schemes for young girls who are studying in schools, rental schemes for older women, which are affordable, training programs to teach women to cycle form a very critical component of women embracing cycling. Now here I'd just like to give you some very quick examples of what we've been able to do in the India Cycles for Change Challenge, which is just in its initial stage with about 7 months down. So when we set up and encourage cities to create the organizing committee for working on this challenge, we were very clear that women members were mandated to be part of this particular committee. And as they started moving into the cities to conduct handlebar surveys to understand what the plight of cyclists are on the roads and as cyclists themselves, and as well as when they reached out to commuter cyclists to understand the perception of cycling in the city by them, we made sure that women form a strong component of either a part of the handlebar survey to understand what the issues are, or are also surveyed during the perception survey to ensure that their needs are taken care of as well. Similarly, many cities organized meetings with women, focus group discussions online and offline to understand what their issues are. Cities conducted cycle training programs, which included both men and women, but particularly on women as well, to help them learn cycling, as well as they did various campaigns surrounding independence and the freedom around cycling, which sort of took the social media with the focus on women as well. So these are just a few initial steps that the cities have taken, but I do think it's good to, sort of look at, it's not just about infrastructure, but it's also about how you train women, how you provide access to cycles, and how you help them or encourage them to cycle on our streets as well. Now, the next piece is about public transportation. So public transportation has a whole array of things that needs a lot of focus, which starts from first service planning and operations. So like I said, women travel differently as to men. They do not travel during peak hours when you have extremely high frequent public transportation. They do not travel to the city center. They might be traveling in areas around their homes. So it's very important to plan routes and optimize the feeder services, keeping women and their needs in mind. Similarly, looking at frequency, fares, for example. So since women travel in short trips, unfortunately, if you have to pay for two separate trips, two short trips separately, they end up being a lot more expensive. So for example, the hopper fares in London provides people to travel at one rate, but take multiple trips within a fixed time period of an hour. So this allows women to do multiple trips, but at a particular rate. And this is very, has seemed to be very, very useful. So similarly, looking at ladies special or reserving seats for women, these are all examples of how operations need to cater to the needs of women. Next is also looking at infrastructure. So for women, it's very essential to have adequate toilets as you're traveling with young toddlers and infants, feeding rooms, ensuring that your stations are well lit and accessible are all very important when it comes to infrastructure requirements with a specific focus on women. With vehicles, again, ensuring that, deciding whether it's a low, medium, or a high flow bus, ensuring that the heights of the support are very comfortable for women and children, the aperture width and door width, these are all details that make a big difference for women. Information and communication system is also very, very critical. If you could have real-time information so that women know when they should leave their home to take the next bus, will help them from spending too much of time waiting in the bus stop and making them some susceptible to harassment. Similarly, having maps that tell you which are the stations, where the public toilets are, where the feeding rooms are, etc., would give them a lot of confidence as well. And having very clear campaigns against violence to ensure that we start taking action against violence in our public spaces is very critical. Last but not the least is also about institutional changes. It's very important to set the right goals, the policies and right programs which actually allow women to stay in, to stay on the job, and ensuring that there's enough flexibility and enough culture is one that allows women to work as efficiently as possible as well. So here is an example of Greater Dhaka, the Sustainable Urban Transport Project. So here, for example, in Bangladesh, they had reserved about 20% of seats for women. Secondly, they ensured that in vending areas, there was 15%, which were particularly for women vendors. We always say that vendors add eyes on the street, but sometimes when there's just a lot of male members attracting a lot of male customers, they do tend to put women passengers at a bit of a sort of a discomfort, and hence it's very essential, like you see here, where 15% of vending was particularly kept aside for women vendors. Now, another piece was also about how, garment workers, because there are a lot of garment workers in Greater Dhaka, they were, there were 70% of the garment workers were eligible for subsidized passes, 20% of, construction workers in BRT and maintenance were particularly for women, and that when they had discussions for improving local markets and feeder roads, there were 30%, there was a mandate for having 30% participation by women. So these are some examples of what Bangladesh and Greater Dhaka had done. Next is about intermediate public transportation. Large parts of India are actually public transport deserts. By that, what I mean is that there isn't formal bus systems in most of these cities, and hence intermediate public transport is actually their lifeline. So, in recognizing IPT as a transport service in our cities is very, very critical. Ensuring that their stands are sheltered and well lit would ensure that women feel safe and comfortable in these spaces. if we could verify our drivers, ensure that we have standard operating procedures, all of this would help in reducing harassment within the, within our informal paratransit, informal intermediate public transportation systems, and it would also help women feel a lot more comfortable. Now, we've looked at various in mobility infrastructure or systems and how they need to be changed. But all of this needs to be embedded for longer term transformation through policy and planning. And here, I'd like to share this picture, and I think it's time that I actually interacted with you. Can you tell me what is it that's a bit amiss about this particular picture? So we have the moderator, or the chairperson of this panel, talking about the fact that it's such a great honor to be surrounded by so many experts on women to discuss about women's health. So yeah, go ahead and let me know what is the problem with this particular image. And I think there's a bit of a clue on the picture itself, because this is not a panel, this is a manel. And in fact, if you wanted to talk about women's health, it would have been extremely essential to have women as a part of this particular discussion. So this brings me to the next point, where it's very, very important for us to have women as a part of, decision making as we are looking at creating mobility plans. It needs to be, we need to prepare and implement gendered mobility plans with women as a part of these committees. So here, the next point that I'd like to say is that, cities are creating various policies such as non-motorized transport policy, TOD policy, sustainable urban transport policy. We're creating CMPs, comprehensive mobility plans in many of our cities, but it's very essential that all of these are gendered, they're inclusive. So in order to start that, first is that we need to have some baseline data about how is it that our women are traveling in our cities. In most of the cases, we do not have disaggregated data, and so we do not know how our women are traveling. First, it's very essential for us to measure the mobility patterns of women in our cities. Next, in our plans and policies, to create or set goals and create mobility plans and policies and indicators which underpin women and girls' concerns. And third is to prepare an implementation plan and implement the same. So these 3 points are things that I would call under the testing phase. Most of us are, in most of our cities, we're sort of, beginning to work with this particular issue, and we do not have, we've not had our own experiences, and hence this would be our testing phase. And once we've tested it, it's very important for us to regularly monitor and evaluate the progress of these plans. And this would be the next point, where I would say, let's learn from what we've tested. So let's monitor and evaluate and understand what our learnings are. And finally, use these learnings to scale it up, to improve these policies or plans, or to scale it up with various other future projects that come up as well. So these are the 2 key pieces. One is to look at how we can ensure that our infrastructure and our systems are inclusive, and 2, to ensure that all our policies and plans are inclusive as well. So these are the 2 key big things that we can do to ensure that we make our transportation safe and inclusive for our women. Now, before I, pass it on to Chetan, a piece that I just wanted to share, because was also about my own learning as a professional who's been working in urban transformation projects, which are largely focused on transportation. First is that, when I joined this particular segment many years ago, as you can see, most of the rooms would actually have 2 spaces where you can sit. You can sit on the table, or you can sit, right behind where all of these officials are sitting. So here is a meeting with the police commissioner, as well as the commissioner of the city. And as you can see, it's largely filled with men folk, except me, of course. And most often in the past, I was always sitting, way behind, maybe in the second set of chairs that you see, and mostly listening in as a young professional. But very soon I realized that I had important points that I wanted to voice out, and in order to voice out and be heard, I needed to sit at the table. And as you can see today that I'm making this presentation to this entire crowd, what I would tell each of you is that if you're a woman, sit at the table. If you have anything important, and you always have, you should sit at the table and voice your opinions confidently. And if you're a male member tuning in, if you know that there's a discussion which is being where there are where it is largely male members, please encourage your women colleagues to join you and to share their views as well. You have a very important role to play. So external meetings, I would request all of you to ensure that women are a part of these discussions. They're sitting at the table and they're voicing out their opinions confidently. Secondly, I believe that our organizations have a very important role to play in ensuring that we thrive. And here I'd like to give you an example. As you can see, I have 2 children, and these young children, my children, are sort of joining me on a site visit with my team. And this is the 𝗪𝘁𝗺𝗲 that I showed you a few minutes ago in Chennai. And like through my about 8 years of working in this organization, there was a lot of flexibility, but it was not always that way. And that's what I'd like to see. Wherever you are, when I first joined the organization, the first person to become, our pregnancy leave was 1 month. And the first person to become pregnant said that 1 month wouldn't cut it. And that, she requested for a 4-month pregnancy leave, which was granted. And by the time, a month or years later, we then increased from 4 months to 6 months. And we've included a lot of flexibility where I, had the opportunity of bringing my young son to office when I worked part-time, and I would even feed my son from the office. But all of this came because we demanded for that flexibility, and we as an organization are continuously looking at how we can improve. And I would encourage each of you that if you see that there is a flexibility that is required for you to perform as a woman, or if you see that your colleague as a woman could perform better if there was a little bit of extra flexibility that is added, please demand that flexibility, and then it would most often be granted to you. And last but not the least, what is a big learning for me is that I never feel guilty of the choices that I make. So here, there was a study visit in Singapore where I had to leave my family for about a week, but I made that choice. And when I was in Singapore, I was entirely focused on the study visit. I would call my home to check up on my family, but I was focused on the study visit. That's a choice I made, and I never let anyone make myself feel guilty. The same way, when I am spending time with my family, if I planned a holiday, then I'm sure that I give my full attention to my family. And I think your choices are yours. You can choose what you want, whether you want to work, whether you don't want to work, whatever they are your choices. But never let anyone feel guilty about the choices we make is something that's worked very well for me. So these are 3 things that really helped me thrive. 1, externally; 2, in the organization; and 3rd, personally as well. So with that, thank you so much. And what I'd like to say is that if you have any other queries, this is a publication that we put together, Women in Transport in Indian Cities. And I encourage you all that if you have any doubts, you could definitely check this out. And I'd like to thank a lot of people such as 𝗪𝘁𝗻𝗍𝗪, Sonal Shah, our ex-colleague Kalpana Vishwanath, and many others who had contributed to this publication, from where I've collected most content and shared with you in this particular presentation. So thank you so much. Over to you, Chetan.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for this heart-pinching facts and scenarios, and also wonderful presentation. It was an eye-opening presentation for me, and these concepts that you covered, they have changed and upgraded my own perception today and perspectives. And I feel like our audience also feels the same way. It's surely there. So going forward, let's getting into some interaction. I would like to ask you a few questions. The first one being as the today's theme that we are looking at, and this year's theme of International Women's Day, it is women in leadership. I am curious to know, you being a leading professional in the field of transportation mobility, have you faced any of other issues that you have not presented, and how were you able to overcome them, and how do you think others in the domain are facing this?
Yeah. So Chetan, yeah, I kind of touched a little bit, but I think there's a lot, a lot more. So very importantly, I think I've been able to thrive at work mostly because of the flexibility that my job had given me. So, for example, I had the opportunity, I started working after my pregnancy, the 2nd pregnancy, in 2 months' time. So I brought my son to my workplace. I would and I'm one of those, like grateful, blessed person because I do have support systems, and that might not be the case with many women, you know, who might be tuning in as well. But because of the support system, I was able to take my health and my child to my office place. But again, because my office place allowed me to bring my children, my child along, and there were no feeding rooms, you know, in our office, but we just reused like a conference room where, I mean, if my son started crying, I would use that space as a feeding room, whereas, you know, otherwise they would use that space as a conference hall. Now, for women to thrive, we really need to have these, because, you know, it's not about this or that. Like, to me, it's never about this or that. For me, it's about both. You know, I want to have a family, and I'm very interested in making sure that I'm, you know, really good at that. But at the same time, I am career driven. I'm very passionate about the change that I want to make. But flexibility has played a critical role in helping me thrive. I've also taken my children to various, you know, like these government offices as well, because we have a lot of our meetings there, but none of them have feeding rooms. And most often I am using these meeting rooms that, you know, if some chief engineer is not in that room, then I'm using that space. So if we do want our women to thrive, both, you know, and not make sacrifices, simple things like feeding rooms, enough number of toilets. In one of our places, like, the toilet was such a mess in the corporation building, and it was you know, it was like you had to you try your level best not to use the toilet. So these sort of very simple things, toilets, ensuring that there are feeding rooms, ensuring just that you have that flexibility, you give that flexibility to your employee. Most often when my children feel sick, I can either bring my children to work or I can work from home. Today, luckily, you know, I think COVID has had its own set of, you know, major issues that we are facing, but at the same time, it's also, you know, created a whole lot of opportunity for us. So if we do want to work from home, there is an opportunity that is possible. So to me, I feel that flexibility has been one of the key critical pieces that has helped me thrive. And I strongly feel that it's something that we must demand. And to me, it's not about being desperate about it, you know, like if I've demanded something, to expect a change immediately, but to continuously strive for that change. Your change might happen tomorrow, the change might happen in 6 months, the change might take a year, but let's remain committed and let's try and, you know, focus on getting that flexibility so that we can thrive in multiple sectors that we want to be as a part of the individual that we are.
Yes, that's a very well taken answer, and also a way forward toward things. The last question, but it's not the least, because what I feel this day particularly has been seen as a marker of many things that change. So how do you think that we can celebrate Women's Day in India and world over that brings urgency to the table regarding safe, comfortable, and ease to women in transport and other domains in the city while moving around?
Yeah, it's a very interesting and thought-provoking question. So I think, you know, if we want to celebrate women, you know, and women in all fields, it's very important for us to listen to women. Most often, very, very often, I've seen that most decisions and, you know, most projects, whether it is about infrastructure or systems, most of them have men, you know, discussing these issues. And when men do discuss these issues, they really don't understand the problems that actually women go through. So if we want to celebrate the International Women's Day, and if we want to celebrate the true essence of this day, we need to ensure that more women are given the opportunity to voice out their concerns. Any, you know, any committee that we create should have, like, why can't it have equal participation of women as men? You know, why should, you know, it only be one woman as against to 10 men? Like, ideally, it should be equal participation of women as to men, and that does require the leadership to prioritize this change. You know, and while one that I would say is that, you know, externally, we should ensure that, you know, this is for organizations and like our city officials, etc., to keep in mind, to ensure that any discussion is equally inclusive. You know, there are as many men as women, but definitely have women in the first place to start with. But secondly, I also would like to say that, to all of us, we have a responsibility. Like, I'm sure you're attending this session, and there are many others who's tuning in. But each one of us, as a woman and as a male, we have responsibilities. As a woman, it is your right to voice out your opinion every time that you think that you have an important thing to say, which will make a difference to the women in the city. See, there are millions of women who don't have voices. A few of us have. And it's our responsibility to speak up, because if we don't speak up, we're actually making sure that those million voices are not heard. And as men, like, I think all of you have the responsibility to ensure that women get opportunities to speak up. If you see that, like I said again, then if you see that there are committees or panels where there are no women, use that opportunity to highlight and give your colleague a chance to voice her opinions. So I would say that for us to ensure that our cities are safe for our women, our cities have to make sure that women are a part of their decision making equally. And it's an opportunity for all of us, and it's our responsibility to take up those leadership positions and then make sure the needs of the millions of women living in our cities are heard.
That's actually a very well taken answer, and thank you for taking these answers very critically and also very clear, not like thinking or holding yourself back over when you're saying it forward. It's very, very less seen into many of our speakers. So while like we are taking this like many crucial understandings today when it comes to mobility, safety for everyone actually on our streets, and focus with like prime focus on design, policies and implementation mainly, which has been a key driver of your entire presentation, and many understanding like perspectives throughout this thing, and importance of women perspective, which is really something that has lost cause in like many years right now. So this is the right time. So this surely motivates us all to take this forward in our own cities and villages, offices, organizations, wherever we are working. And yes, also I'm thanking to all of our viewers who have joined us today evening in this important cause. And also I like urge them to take a pledge to make our cities equal and more sustainable. I hope everyone finds this masterclass fruitful, and thanks to ma'am for actually providing us knowledge like that. And to know more on Practical Cities Initiative, I would like everyone, even ma'am, to subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on our other platforms like Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and we are also on Telegram now. So I would like to end again by saying, please pledge, and I urge everyone like urban professionals, which are young and also senior professionals, to take this step forward and look towards more equal and sustainable cities for everyone. Stay healthy and stay happy.
Thank you so much, Chetan, for the opportunity, and thank you to all the viewers.
Thank you, ma'am.